When you make decisions, you give directions for the organization, for the person, for the department, for a group of people. And every decision you make has more than one message. And no worries, I'm not going to start with there are 4 layers or 4 different ears of any message, Friedemann Schulz von Thun, the scientist from Germany, etc., etc. No, this is not the topic of this week. I'm talking about politics, and I know that this can be a hard topic, and that's exactly why I address it. I received quite a number of emails who said, I don't know how to talk about politics, but isn't it important? Is it? And yes, it is. Political statements in leadership. No matter what you do, no matter where you are, no matter which job or role you have, politics always play an important role, no matter if it's the law about employment or if it's taxation or if it's just regulatory and compliance. And you know how many compliance departments we have in today's times. Politics and political statements are all over the place. However, it is quite a miracle that still leaders claim that they are apolitical or they are not political, or they emphasize, which makes it even less credible, they emphasize this is not a political message. As soon as someone says this is not a political message, it is as credible as someone who says don't worry about your job, because that's the moment where you can start to worry about your job. Leaders have to make political statements, because every day at work, you will see that there are political moments and you have to make a judgment and you have to make a statement on them. How do you want to be apolitical or non-political? And by the way, saying that you have no political opinion already is a political statement, and hint, not a good one. So how do you communicate political messages in leadership? And that is the topic of today. Let's face it, politics are all over the place. We now have to do it better because often we see that it's approached the wrong way. That is a very important message to start with here. There is one approach which is not possible. And I quote word by word from one of these annual gatherings of a company where I was part of as an external consultant. And one of the senior managers stepped up, went on stage and said, after, of course, a short introduction and a bunch of PowerPoint slides, which were way too boring, we get to the point where we have critical moments and the company has to make a decision where they go on the items of conflict that were there, the aspects of conflict. And suddenly the manager, as a senior executive, goes on a 5-minute rant, including, and I quote, a statement which says, voting for all these lefties, you're going to regret that. You see where you will end up by doing so. Let's just be crystal clear. Statements like that are unacceptable because you are threatening people for their political vote. No matter what you do, you are obliged by every single democratic country, either a constitution or some other form of document or simply consensus in society, people can make a vote. Of course, it doesn't mean you do not have to agree with them. You do not have to offer them a career, and you do not have to offer them a seat on the board with certain political opinions, especially when you go to the extreme left or the extreme right, and I get to the extremes and extreme political opinions in a bit. However, you cannot threaten people for going to vote. That is unacceptable. What you can do is you can inform. I just give you an example. When you, for example, have a company and you're in the online business and, for example, you sell, for example, alcohol, or you offer games of luck, also known as gambling, and you say, hey, I have to inform you that this party XYZ plans to put a regulation on our business which pretty much limits our business model down to an amount that we have to lay off half the staff. Very important here, you must be factual. You have to show this is the regulation, this is the impact on our business model, and that will be the consequence if we get this party into government. Informing people is always okay as long as you go by the facts. Because politics apply and affect absolutely anyone. Management, people who work for you, strategic, tactical, operational level, every single person is affected by politics. And that's why we have three categories where you have to tell people, where do you stand on X, Y, Z? First level is the personal level. When you have a personal bias, and I know that some people will now say, oh, I don't have biases. Come on, unconscious biases. There is a reason why it's called unconscious. You don't know about them. So when you have any kind of biases, and maybe when you hear this podcast for more than a week, there are quite a number of moments where I tell people, my bias on a certain view. Because, of course, there is a scientific point of view, but there are also certain opinions. And when I give my opinion, because when you listen to this, you most likely want to have an opinion on certain aspects, I have to tell you that there are certain biases. I'm a self-employed entrepreneur. I'm single. I do not have family. I do not have children. I am a voter, not a member. I'm a former member, but I'm a voter of the Liberal Party in Germany. And liberals, not to be mixed up with libertarians who want to abolish the state completely, which is completely bonkers. But of course, I have a certain point of view. And let's say, for example, with the German Green Party, which is very left-winged, I have a very limited common ground. And by the way, even now in government, where we have the so-called traffic light coalition between the Labour Party, the Liberals and the Green Party, even the leader of the Liberals said the only common ground we have with the Greens is legalizing marijuana. So when you have these biases, tell people that these biases are there. People want to know when they hear a statement from you, where do they stand? And by the way, when you have a personal bias or a personal opinion, which is perfectly fine, an opinion does not protect discrimination. Deliberate lies also are not protected by opinions. When you say Earth, in my opinion, is flat, it's a disc, or you say vaccines cause autism, or there is some sort of Illuminati, and normally next step is you go for some anti-Semitic rant. These are straightforward lies with not a single bit of factual proof. And you most likely will only point to certain Facebook postings and YouTube videos. Congratulations for being certified Facebook expert here. Your personal bias can always be displayed and should always be announced, that people know what is your direction on a certain opinion. But lies or discrimination are never covered or protected by personal opinion. Because normally you can spot these people pretty quickly who say, oh, everyone today is offended by anything. You're not allowed to say anything anymore. No. It's just that society stopped to accept that you are harassing people. And I can only say, this week I watched the movie She Said, about the Harvey Weinstein case. And just a couple of days before that, I watched the movie Call Jane, about the movement that helped people to do abortions in the 60s, which were illegal back in the days. And when you watch these movies, and I honestly tell you, when you are a leader, you have to watch them, especially when you're male, because it will give you a different direction. And especially, and probably you can hear that with the tone of my voice, hearing the original recordings of Harvey Weinstein and what he has done still gives me shivers. And it's a couple of days ago that I watched the movie, and never in my life have I faced any situation like that. And I'm very sure that these kind of situations are still out there, and the people who are affected by them are always the same: women and minorities. So when you have a personal bias, give people your point of view. Tell them about your biases. When you have a certain political opinion, don't hide it, because people will get it anyway. And if you don't tell them what your political opinion is, then people will make something up, and that never ends well. The overthinking effect, where people close a gap of knowledge by themselves, always ends with 95, or statistically ends with 95% negative emotions towards you. And that's not what you need as a leader. So step one, the level one, we have three categories, as I told you. Category number one is the personal level. Just put your biases on display and tell them, this is my political opinion. So when you just ask me right now, for example, I am with the Liberal Party in Germany. In the US, I am with the Democrats for obvious reason, because in my opinion, Trump, Mr. Grab them by the, I'm not going to say this word on the podcast, is completely unelectable. And the fact that they even remotely consider that he could be president again tells me that the GOP is a party which is morally bankrupt. And of course, you might disagree with that right now. We can still have a healthy and fact-oriented discussion, but we're not going to have a discussion when you say, oh, but Ron DeSantis in Florida said that there is no climate change, because I have no time to waste on people who are unable to read. Sorry for that. So display your personal bias. I just gave you a perfect example for that. Second level is the organizational level. There must be a consensus with certain groups who communicate with one voice what they do, because otherwise people will do the following. Let's say you have a certain point of view on working times. When should people work? And probably you think, well, I think we just trust them. We focus on results and we take it from there. Another manager says, no, it needs all to be documented. You have to clock in, clock out. We need a software tool for that. We must have a device on the wall where people clock in, clock out every day. As soon as you have different managers, or even worse, executives speaking with different points of view, not agreeing or being unable to agree, it simply means that you will very quickly have employees who find out, where do I have to go to get the answer I want? There's a whole team there's a whole group, it's called opinion leadership, who will tell their employees, if you want to have this, ask that person. If you want to have that, ask that person. Not because these people are experts in the field, but because you know that they will support the case. So when you have the organizational level, second category, then you need to have a consensus within the group. And I know how hard it can be to have a consensus on that. And of course, it must be amongst managers, team leaders, executives, people who work for you, operational level, tactical level, strategical level, unions, representatives, officials. There are quite a number of groups, and you have to agree. And also, if you are unable to agree, especially executives with big egos tend to be easy on disagreement, and I can live with disagreement. However, you will sit there having to disagree in public while, for example, the unions speak with one voice. Who do you think is more convincing to the general or average person in the room? So always think of agreeing, if you like it or not. You have to come to an agreement. So the second level of how to make political statements on an organizational level is agree with your groups. What is the political message you want to send? And I give you an example from my life. When you look on my LinkedIn, you will see that I, for example, work for GlaxoSmithKline, a British pharmaceutical company, and I also work for New Horizons, Microsoft's New Horizons, the largest Microsoft Learning partner. And they are companies. This is a company based in the US. So as you can imagine, it is not a company that says, oh, work-life balance, 35 hours a week, and the representative of the unions will be presented to you on your day one of work. It's not that kind of company. And I went to these companies deliberately because they offered me a career based on, if you put in more, you will get out more. And of course, some people might now disagree and they say, hey, that's not fair, maybe. And here are my biases. I am single, do not have a family, do not have children. I am willing to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And as a self-employed person, and that is why I became self-employed, if I do more, I get more. This is why I do this job. And when you have people going to certain employers, and we are still on the organizational level, then you will have an attraction to certain people as long as you made very clear statements. I knew way before I signed any contract with GlaxoSmithKline or with New Horizons and then working for Microsoft as a partner, etc., I knew way before I signed up what I signed up for. Long hours, many opportunities, international outlook, lots of travel, seeing the world, making a decent, or I have to say, a good amount of money. And when you look on this organizational level, it is important that this will be presented to you in the very beginning, because when you hire the wrong person, you have someone who might fit the bill with all the expertise they have, but suddenly you expect them to focus on results and you expect them to work by themselves. You expect them to be able to find the next task by themselves, and you expect them to focus on results, probably work a bit longer when there's more work to do. And they say, oh, I think it's more 35 hours or 37.5 or 40 hours a week. And then I just clock out and continue next week. When the hours are over, the hours are over. And that's how I work. You will make this person, either you fire the person or they will leave anyway, because you cannot agree on how to work together. And a mishire costs you, depending on the position, somewhere in between 80 to 120% of an annual salary to actually get someone on that seat until these people are able to work by themselves. It is a very expensive endeavor to have a mishire. So second level is the organizational level. Third level is the society level. Society level means that what is your job, your responsibility, and especially your accountability towards the people out there, towards anyone in society, towards certain communities, probably communities that are in the focus due to actual news, what's happening right now, or maybe communities which are very local, or even more than local, they are regional or even nationwide or even globally. And when you look into the recent past, many organizations, not all of them, but many organizations did very well when it comes to political statements. They have a very clear point of view about, for example, the invasion of Russia into the Ukraine, the war that started then. They made unambiguously clear who they support. They have a point of view and communicate the point of view on Black Lives Matter, or on human rights, or on the LGBTQIA plus community, or on diversity, or on working rights. They make their point of view heard. And the advantage of that is that they attract people who fit their bill. Of course, there might be the downside when you have a ravaging discrimination going on, that you only hire people who are the next white man who share your opinion because they get paid to do so. You have to take care of that. But you have to see who fits into your organization and who does not fit at all. People have to know what's the deal in this organization. And I have to add that because I promised you to get back to it. Extremes are always wrong. No matter if you go to the extreme left with the communism party or whatever else you have in your country, or to the extreme right, some weird Nazi party, the AfD in Germany, or UKIP in the UK, former British National Party we had there. Extremes are never right. When you say get all the immigrants out, nonsense. You know that we need immigration. Anyone knows that we need immigration, because there are many jobs where you simply say, we need qualified people who give us a different point of view. I want to have an international audience as a customer base. So how can I have a non-diverse workforce? When you go to the extreme left and you say we should have 100% tax on certain incomes from certain levels, which, by the way, some weird communist parties claim we should have, then, of course, no one would do the job anymore, because many people are driven by money on these levels and they simply wouldn't do the jobs. And these jobs are needed. Just because communists do not understand it doesn't mean that it's not there. And by the way, here you see already a certain bias, which is the background of me with the Liberal Party in Germany, not to be mixed up with the Libertarians. They are a completely different ball game. I do not support Libertarians in the US. I'm with the Democrats. So I'm making political statements right here. Extremes are always wrong. You need to reflect rather than emotionalize. Because when you as a manager say, oh, we need to abolish taxation, it's all too high, it's all too expensive, let's just go from gross to net, it's my money, my work, I keep everything. Look, you're going to be affected by that first. Because many of you will have family and children. And when we do the whole game of anyone keeps what they make, I, as a single person, will not be affected. You will have children who need doctors. You will have children who need schools, universities, and whatnot. So let's focus on reality. Never go to the extremes. If you go to any extremes, extremes are always wrong. Focus on results. Put your glasses on, put a certain view on where you step into the role of the person sitting at the other end of the table, or people who are in different roles. What could be their point of view to understand them better? But at the end, you have to come to a conclusion. Have very clear guidelines what the political position of your organization is. Be unambiguously clear about that and manage expectations accordingly, because then you will be attractive for the right people who then will join your teams. And also, you will have a very clear employer's brand on the market, because employer branding is a major part of making your position unambiguously clear. When you go on my profiles, no matter if it's on LinkedIn or on Instagram or on Facebook, you will find unambiguously clear political statements of what I think is the position of my organization. And I make the position unambiguously clear. And by the way, I always did. And when I still hear people, and these are people who are not only opportunists, but also shameful people with people who are truly spineless. When I still hear people in the professional speaking world who say, well, I'm not making political statements because that might put bookers off. Well, if you're of that opinion, it simply means you don't care about anyone suffering, because you're most likely in a privileged position and you just like to keep it that way. Not having a political point of view disqualifies you as an expert on any level, and no organization should ever work with you, because any organization has a political point of view. Clear guidelines, very clear statements, very clear communication, managing expectations, being attractive for the right people, and getting these people into your staff, into your team, in your organization, because your employer brand is so strong because every brand has very clear-cut boundaries, which is why you like certain brands and you dislike others. So your job is to make political statements on 3 levels: personal, organizational, and on society level, as I just told. And now the job is, how do we do that? And of course, now you have to sit down, and your job after this podcast is to sit down and say, what is our political level? And I just give you an example. And an example where one person in an organization, let's just take an example where maybe someone was a performer, a top performer in the past, but then they focus on something else in life. So suddenly they are not top performer, then they become average, and then they're actually below average. And in one organization, I'm not going to name them here, they decided to say, we are a family business. People gave huge parts of their private lives for us, so we keep them even when they are below par to a certain level, not to an extreme level, but to a certain level. And of course, the downside of that is that you might have people in the organization who say, hey, this person gets a lot of money and doesn't do proper work. And then you have to explain what happened in the past. But the advantage also is that, and let's face it, when you're probably 25, you're very frustrated by these people. But when maybe you marry or children are on the way, family grows and you become 35, 40, 45, 50, you probably sooner or later will say, well, I don't want to spend all my life at work. And then, well, what's next? Then you have to see the next step here is that you see the advantages of the political statements made. And of course, it's frustrating when you have someone on the team who will be kept, although they do not perform. And I can tell you from my employers with GlaxoSmithKline or New Horizons, Microsoft, these people would have disappeared pretty quickly. On the other hand, having a certain reliability might come in with that you have to give a certain trade-off, that the income is slightly lower, but you have more safety and security, which is, by the way, one of the motivation why some people go for public service. The political statements are unambiguously clear with any organization. The question is, where do you stand? Your call. And of course, there's more on that. I published about this. So you might now think, well, either I have a question or I received quite a number of emails of people who said, can I make suggestions for topics for next year? And of course you can. Drop me an email, nb@nb-networks.com. Always happy to discuss and always happy, of course, to receive any ideas what you like to hear on this podcast. Of course, when you have a very specific request where you say, hey, I need workshops, coaching, speaking, we need a speaker for the event, or consulting, mentoring, project interim management, or hey, we have an event, can you speak there or host it? Yes, I can do that as well. But we can also just talk about your topics, your questions, or I'm always happy to receive feedback from you. And I have to say thank you yet again. Even with the English podcast, we made it into top 20 in Switzerland. We had a double ranking this week in Switzerland, top rankings in business and management, the most competitive categories on the podcast, in the podcast world. So thank you very much for even Swiss people listening to a German guy with a German accent. So thank you very much for that. I know that your German is way more charming, more friendly, and more nice than the German I speak. I'm from Northern Germany. The accent is, let's say, a bit straightforward. No, let's just put it that way. So I'm always happy to hear from you via email, nb@nb-networks.com. That's number one. Number two, join the expert letter, expert.nb-networks.com. There will be a major publication in due course of next year. I'm working on a major scientific publication, which will be available at no charge. As usual, when you sign up for the expert letter, it's 100% content, ad-free guarantee. Every Wednesday, you receive an email in the morning where you receive everything for free at no charge, and then you can take it from there. expert.nb-networks.com. But now the most important part, you have to apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the positive change that you want to have in your organization. I wish you all the best doing so, always happy to help. And now there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.